In this monthly episode of CEOs and CSR, we interview Lori Kraska, founder of Growth Owl, an organization empowering clients with best practices and tools to generate funding, sponsorship, and support. In our CEOs and CSR series, we sit down with for-profit leaders to discuss their philosophy on giving and how they go about building their organization's corporate social responsibility strategy. Thanks, everyone, for tuning into this CEOs and CSR episode. Today, we have Lori Zoss Kraska, who's the founder of Growth Owl. I'm really excited about this interview because I think she's going to add a lot of value to the 100-plus nonprofits that we've interviewed, but we'll get into that. But before we do, Lori, thanks so much for your time today.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Yes. So let's start with Growth Owl. What is Growth Owl? And I'd love to hear a little bit about the history and the why behind it.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. So I started Growth Owl back in 2018. And specifically what Growth Owl does is we work with nonprofits, associations, other purpose-driven organizations, social entrepreneurs to help position them for resources and funding, specifically from Fortune 1000 companies and other large corporations. And that came about because I worked with PBS and NPR just about 10 years in the area of corporate support. Myself and a team of other folks went out and we would find support for the programming that your viewers and your listeners see and love on public media for various stations. And we found that through corporations. And I absolutely loved my work with public media. I still work with some public media stations and I'm still a consumer of that media. But I thought to myself, wouldn't it be great if we could translate that success into other types of nonprofits? So that's how Growth Owl came about. And how Growth Owl works with nonprofits, it can work in a few different ways. We do direct consulting, so working with the president, the executive director, or maybe a senior vice president of development. And maybe they have really, really good skills in the areas of major giving or plan giving, individual giving, what have you. But when it comes to putting a corporate strategy together, maybe they haven't been successful or they just haven't tried it. So kind of giving them the playbook per se, the law of the land and how you work the nuances in corporate. Also, we provide direct representation when we do have the availability. It is very limited, but we take the expertise that we have and actually work on behalf of nonprofits to contact and represent them to large Fortune 1000 companies, and also some research as well. It might be a small-based nonprofit that's just unsure, should we even look to corporations for sponsorship or funding? And we do the due diligence, do the work to basically make the case that you should go after it or not. So, those are just a few things that Growth Owl does. We have nonprofit clients all over the country and love to travel and see them in person. But a lot of my work is also done just like this, virtually.
Yeah. Wow. So as we said before I hit record, of the 100-plus nonprofits you've interviewed, usually fundraising is one of the more common asks when we kind of wrap up the conversation after sharing their mission and their vision and their plan as an organization. How have you seen common threads between nonprofits of the fundraising journey? Because we've dealt with smaller and medium-sized nonprofits, so a lot of times it's just a small one person or a small team usually that just started a nonprofit because they saw a need and wanted to help people, but maybe don't have much experience in the fundraising space, and so that's why they didn't really have that be a focus. So is there a lot of training that you're doing as well and helping people explain what their I don't want to say value prop in kind of a for-profit sense, but more so as a nonprofit sense? Do they have to really, quote unquote, sell their organization to corporations, and you help with that too? Or is that not as common?
That's exactly correct, Joseph. You've described it beautifully, actually. So here's what I see a lot of times. And it doesn't matter if you're a one-person nonprofit that just has a couple $1,000s in the bank account versus a multi-million-dollar nonprofit that's nationally known. The issues are the same. Sometimes you have confidence in various areas of fundraising, but if it's a newer area or if you're unsure with how corporate works, it's a little daunting and can be a little scary. So my work at Growth Owl really helps to train anybody who's tasked with asking for money or resources from corporations, starting with the approach. How do you research? How do you reach out to these people? email, phone, in person, utilizing LinkedIn, utilizing Google Alerts, and then what happens once you get the meeting. So yeah, it's a full process of training because I spent so much time working with corporations in my work and even being on the corporate side before I went into public media. I understand how they operate. So it's almost like I'm building kind of a bridge as an interpreter between corporations and nonprofits that maybe don't have the experience working with them. Training is a huge component of what I do, and it can be very individualized one-on-one per the person, or it can be something that's more like a group training focus if it's a group strategy to try to find corporate funding.
Okay. Awesome. So you wrote a book on this.
I did. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the book and maybe what are some of the main points that you
Yeah.
felt compelled to add to that book and to share with the world.
Absolutely. So my book is called The Boardroom Playbook, the not so ordinary guide to corporate funding for your purpose-driven organization, easily found on Amazon. Just type in The Boardroom Playbook. And everything in The Boardroom Playbook is under the foundation of what I call me, me, mo. And me, me, mo is my process for how I engage corporations. And the me, me, mo stands for aligning your mental, your message, and your motion to get you to the money. Because I truly believe you have to be in a good headspace. You have to have the right communication skills and have the right message. And you have to be doing the right things. And if they all come together beautifully, you're going to be more effective at engaging with corporations. So everything in the book is around Mimimo. It's also written a very conversational style. It's only a little over 100 pages. So it's the type of book you can consume quickly, then go back to the pieces that really resonate with you. I use a lot of client case study stories, and I just have a very fun, engaging style of writing. So a lot of people have commented on that. So along with the Mimimo, I would say the area that's getting a lot of feedback in terms of when I have people write to me about the book or want to
Yeah.
contact me is the power of brevity. I am a huge fan of the power of brevity. And let me explain this. I think if there's one thing that your listeners can do to change how they approach their first approach to a corporation, is that they usually are saying way too much in a first email or a first conversation. You've got to understand that these decision makers in corporations that are kind of the gatekeepers for corporate money, corporate philanthropic dollars, corporate CSR dollars, they have thousands of other things they're doing and literally are consuming thousands of pieces of digital communication every day. So when an email comes through or a voicemail comes through that's just way too long, they're going to ignore it. So I work with my clients on the first step is this power of brevity in their messaging. And a little formula I like to use when you're sending an email is keep it to 150 words. Who are you? How does your nonprofit's mission connect with what the corporation is doing in terms of
Yeah.
support?
Yep.
And what do you want next? Do you want another meeting? Do you want the opportunity to send material? If you're able to successfully stick to that, your chances of engaging a decision maker to want to keep speaking with you, set up a meeting, have immediately skyrocketed because not a lot of people are incorporating brevity into their messaging.
Yeah. And a little bit of the so I'm in. This is my side passion project, this podcast. But during the day, I'm in sales at Amazon myself,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of reflection on what's in it for them, or what's in it for me. Putting yourself in the shoes of these corporations. I
Yeah.
think that's highlighted in that second of the third components that you said of that email of
Yeah.
how does your organization connect to them. Because they're a lot of times they're going to have to sell this up their chain and get approval up their chain if they're not the
Absolutely.
decision makers. So you got to arm them with the information that they could use when seeking approval. So that makes total sense.
Yeah, and think about it. We live in a society now with smartphones where we watch videos with a 15-second pre-roll and we still get a little frustrated that it's too long.
Yep.
We are used to these like half a millisecond notifications on our phones to look at our phone. We have been trained now to consume information in a brief way, but we expect it to be impactful. So we have to translate that into our initial engagement. And remember, when you're outreaching to a corporation for the first time, It is just to get them interested to want to talk to you.
Yep.
You're not trying to get the funding over the email. You may not even been trying to get a meeting yet. You just want to get them interested to respond. So if you break it down that way, that really helps with you being a bit more brief and compact in your communication.
Okay. Research was another thing that you mentioned was a key
Yeah.
part of being a successful organization in the fundraising space. How do you break down research? I don't know if in your book or just in your practice.
Yeah. So in both, I have the same philosophy. I am a huge, huge fan of LinkedIn. LinkedIn can provide you with so much information about the decision maker or the person that you're going to be outreaching to. It's amazing. And what I think is really interesting, if you've seen LinkedIn profiles lately, they're actually getting longer. People are writing more about themselves and their interests. Some folks will even say, I personally resonate with these issues: food insecurity, climate change, what have you. And it's like, wow, I mean, you have a great prospect list for yourself just looking at LinkedIn profiles. And what's great about that is when you go to craft that message that I talked about earlier, you can reference those words in that connectory email. Hey, I saw that you're interested in food insecurity. We run a local food bank. Would love to talk to you more about that. So you've shown that you've done a little research about them and you've made that connection. So when it comes to individuals, I'm a big fan of researching on LinkedIn. And then when it comes to companies, actually researching what the companies are due, there's two things. Take a look at companies' annual reports, as well as any reports to the community that they're doing on corporate social responsibility. What's great about those reports, they will specifically tell you what types of projects they're funding. And you'll probably even find contact names and sometimes even contact information of who to talk to, which is great. I'm also a huge fan of Google Alerts.
Yep.
So if there's a company you really want to get to know, if you've never set up a Google Alert, it's simple. Go to Google, type up, set up a Google Alert. It'll give you step-by-step instructions, and Google will automatically send you news pieces about these companies. My only, not red flag, but my only caution is if you set up Google Alerts, you might want to set up a separate email because you're going to get a lot from
Yes.
Google. So those are a couple of my research tips that really help myself, my clients, and other folks that I've talked to that really want to crack the nut with corporate decision makers.
Yeah, yeah. One thing that you mentioned about LinkedIn that I want to dive into is that people are being more and more open about what they believe in,
Yeah.
and that I think is also reflected in the corporate space as corporate social responsibility CSR has evolved over time. Decades ago, I don't think there was as big of an expectation of an employee on their employer to
Right.
have public or deep involvement in something like climate change or giving back to their
Yes.
local community. So how in your line of work and experience that you've had, how has CSR evolved?
I'll tell you what's really interesting. And it was actually USA Today that did a really interesting article about this towards the end of 2020. Sorry. So when everybody was talking about the pandemic in 2020, very quietly, something was going on in with Fortune 500s. They were hiring chief CSR officers, chief diversity, equity, and inclusion officers, all these different type of social enterprise type of officers, and we're also given budgets to find ways that companies can engage in the community or with other philanthropic organizations. And if you go back and look, they did this more in between 2020 and 2021 than ever before, and it continues to increase. So that's a big change. To your point, like 10 years ago, was CSR even something people talked about?
Yeah.
Now it's actually a funding option outside of traditional corporate philanthropy for different types of nonprofits that resonate with a corporation's CSR goals. And what I also love about working with corporate CSR folks, they tend to be a bit more reachable. They tend to really want to talk to you more than maybe somebody in corporate marketing who just has a ton on their plate, right? Their job is to learn about what's happening that they can get involved in. So your chances of reaching someone in corporate CSR or corporate DEI is probably even a little bit stronger initially than some of the other titles we talked about.
Yeah, and some of those other titles too, like they weren't initially hired with this in the job description, right?
Mm-hmm.
To seek out ways to give
Yeah,
back to community. So it's a new conversation that they, a lot of times have to have if their organization isn't hiring those roles or
that's
has a
right.
budget for those roles yet. So it's definitely a new conversation. So totally see that. Um, so once you work with your clients and your customers and you get to a point where they've built a relationship with a
Yeah.
corporation is like, hey, I'm all for your mission. I want to help out. I want to give. um how do you work with your clients on how much to ask for, right? I think
Yeah.
that's another big challenge that
Yeah.
some of the small and medium sized organizations that I've spoken with are like, cool, we have these awesome relationships with these local private companies.
Yeah.
How do we know how much to ask for?
So that is a phenomenal question. And this is one of the, and I'll give you my answer, but this might
Yeah,
vary.
yeah.
Everybody's experience is different, right? But I'll just kind of give you my best practice. This is why it's very important to enjoy the process and not to give so much in the beginning, because you want to get to know them and let them tell you what they're doing.
Mm,
So by the time you get to the meeting, where you're either doing a meeting by Zoom or luckily you get in to see somebody, you've probably done some really good research and you've been able to find that they're maybe giving the local companion animal rescue $25,000. If you're a similar organization of similar size, maybe not in the same work, but you've got some social proof there from another organization of what they're giving. So my suggestion would be, oh, well, I see that, XYZ Corporation support companion animal rescue, 25,000. Is that a number that you might be thinking in terms of
mm.
support for us? There's don't be afraid to ask about money, just not right away. Don't do it in your
Right.
first email. You do that when you because eventually it all goes to the ask, right?
Yep.
Now, if you're looking for something a bit larger, that's where maybe one or two additional more meetings come into play. Because what I find is if you're able to communicate all the different components that are available in your program, maybe it's a specific program you're looking for funding for, the more you can communicate all of those facets of it and then be able to relate each one of those facets to what a corporation is already supporting,
Hmm.
they might be actually adding up in their mind and finding more money in their mind without you knowing yet.
Yeah.
So that's where doing due diligence up front and really showing that connection really helps. So that's my process in terms of the ask.
Gotcha. So one of it, and we talked about this before we started hitting record, but for individuals who want to contribute to a nonprofit, a lot of
Mhm.
times what's important to them is to understand how far their dollar is going. So like if
Yeah,
I give $10 or $100, what exactly is this doing for your organization or for the people that your
right.
organization is supporting?
Yes.
Is that as common of a requirement for corporate giving, or are they a little bit more flexible typically, or do they not care as much about saying, hey, we're going to give you 25,000, but you have to tell us how many people this provided food for,
Right.
or how many solar panels this built for, this community?
So I will be very honest with corporate money, it is very hard to get general operating dollars. It's very
Hmm.
hard. It's not impossible, but it's tougher. Corporations, at least now, this is what I'm seeing and have seen in the past couple of years, they like to be a part of something very specific. So it's more than just talking about your mission, vision, and values. But if you have a specific program, maybe that's reflective of something you're doing specifically in the community they're headquartered, or maybe that somehow involves their employees as volunteers. The more specific that you can get, the better your chances for funding. Now, when that project is over, yes, they will want some sort of report as to how many stakeholders did you affect, what they might have some questions about how often their brand was integrated with yours. I mean, everybody is very different, but there is usually some sort of summary report at the end.
Yeah.
But again, I don't want to discourage you from trying to get general
Yeah.
operating
Yeah.
money,
Yeah.
but really the success is the more specific you can get about a program, the better
Hmm.
your chances with getting corporate dollars.
Gotcha. And I'm assuming that's built into the pre-research that you have to do of
Yes.
once you come with an ask, they're probably going to follow up and say, awesome, what is this going towards? Or you would have already said that in the ask of what it's going to be going towards. Yeah.
Yeah, a great example, the National Park Foundation, which is a huge foundation that helps our national parks, they have some very impressive Fortune 500s that contribute millions of dollars to them every year. If you go and look at their website, you will see that no one is just giving them a check to do
Yes.
anything. You will see that there are very specific programs around stewardship, around helping kids that are maybe more of in a city environment get outside to an environment they're not used to being in. So very, very specific, right?
Right.
So just keep that in mind, and I think you'll be more successful in engaging corporations.
All right. Wow. In your book, so we covered your philosophy, research, kind of one of the main challenges of fundraising. We covered that another challenge is sometimes having a conversation with a corporation and being able to explain your mission in a very short, soundbitey way.
Yeah.
What are some other aspects of or challenges that nonprofits maybe are facing that you help them out with that might be related to the fundraising process that maybe we haven't covered yet?
Sure. We spend a lot of time on mindset. I'm a big believer on having the right mindset before you go in, even before you write an email. Like, this is how much coaching I do on mindset. If you put in your calendar that you are going to start to engage with a couple of companies via email on a certain morning, and earlier that morning, you got a flat tire and your car got towed, you're not in a good headspace.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
telling you, this stuff makes a difference when you're putting something together. So don't just do something because you want to check it off your to-do list. You
Mm,
got to be in your right frame of mind. The other thing too is sometimes what happens, you do a great job, you get to the engagement, and then you're getting ready for the meeting, and then what I call periwinkle zombies sometimes start to kick in. And a periwinkle zombie to me is anything in your mind that hijacks progress and hijacks you from thinking a positive result. So I chose periwinkle because it at first looks like a very nice, comforting color, but behind it is this zombie that just like hijacks you. And some of those thoughts are, oh, I can't believe I've even got this meeting. They're not going to want to even do anything with us. It's probably just a courtesy, or oh, I know I'm going to flub it. I flubbed it in the last meeting. You start to think of all these things, and it's like,
yep.
hold on, this hasn't even happened, and you're already, prohibiting the success of your progress, right? So mindset is so important. And what I do with my clients is I really encourage them to write things down, journal. I mean, naturally things will come in your head, but just get them out and then put them aside. And another little thing I recommend to clients is good old H2O. When you go into a meeting, or even if you're on Zoom, I mean, I always have water with me. There's some great research about if you get lost in a meeting, or maybe you get a little confused, or the moment seems a little big for you, take some water. There's something about H2O that stimulates the thoughts of your brain to get back on track. Great
Oh,
research
cool.
behind it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So just staying hydrated really helps you out.
yeah.
So those are just a few of my other tips that I talk more about in the book and that have been very successful. And again, all types of clients. This isn't just work that I do with large nonprofits. My smallest client is a 2-person nonprofit that
Yeah.
helps the Amazon River dolphin. I mean, and
Yeah.
they're seeing success from these tips as well. So it doesn't matter, the size. It really is just, the quality and the work that you're putting into it.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. Whew. So now you actually answered it. No, I paused because you answered one of my next questions is
Oh,
the
okay.
size of organizations that you usually work with,
Yeah.
small, medium, large. And I'm happy to hear that it doesn't matter the size.
No, it, it,
Yep.
it doesn't. And I got to tell you, I get a lot of questions about, well, Lori, I'm a little, parent teacher association. Is the local headquartered Fortune 500 really going to want to talk to me? Absolutely. Now more than ever, large companies want to talk to smaller nonprofits. And
Mm,
there's 2 reasons why. The first is, as I mentioned earlier, back in 2020, they were hiring all of these CSR chiefs, right? The other area they are focusing now is they're hiring vice presidents and senior managers that just work on behalf of headquartered Fortune 500s to find opportunities in their backyard.
Yep.
It's pretty amazing. That's going on now. So
Yeah.
that's really good. And number two, large corporations are starting to finally understand, and quite frankly, I don't know why it took this long, but they're starting to understand that if they provide a $15,000 gift to a 3-person PTA versus a $15,000 gift to a multi-million-dollar nonprofit, they realize that impact on the 15K for 3 people, that's huge. That's huge. So they can make more impact with maybe some smaller donations, working with smaller nonprofits. So the timing right now to engage corporations, if you're a small nonprofit, is great.
Wow. And I've seen a lot of times these smaller and medium-sized nonprofits, they've been organizations that have been founded by somebody in the community that they're serving. So they're on the grounds. They're in the communities that they're working with. So they have a lot of times a very deep connection because of that.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So I'm sure there's a lot of nonprofit executive directors that are listening to this, that this might be music to their ears, and they'll probably want to reach out. So what's the proper channel for getting in touch with you and learning more about Growth Owl?
Yeah, so you can check out my website, thegrowthowl.com. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. Just go to LinkedIn and type in my name, Lori Zoss Kraska, and you will find me there.
All right. And then this was the last question that I had. Do you have any stories of organizations that you've worked with and maybe successes you've had? And I'd love to hear some of the output of your expertise and your teachings and your learnings. I'm assuming they're very like fundraising based, but I'd love to hear them.
So yes, I try to tell people that corporate support is a long game. You know, I have clients that I work with where it's taken a few months before we've gotten a response.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also had some success stories where within 48 hours we heard back.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. So I can tell you that I work with an environmental-based nonprofit. They are a national nonprofit, but they've never looked to engage much into corporate work, into corporate support. And even myself, I thought to myself, well, they're doing so much with other types of traditional foundations. I wonder how they will be received by the corporate world. So in doing some research and really look at some of the good work that they are doing, especially in the areas of land conservation, I found some very high level corporate, Fortune 500 companies that were supporting that kind of work. So started reaching out on their behalf, and we had some major, like top 20 of the Fortune 500s respond within 2 days. And I was just as surprised because, like I said, that doesn't always happen. But here's what I will say. Their, I don't want to say offering, but their mission and their projects are so niche and so specific, I think, and we use that power of brevity. We're very brief in terms of just giving enough to want to have a conversation, that it really struck a chord and they were interested in wanting to learn more. So that goes back to me saying about being as specific as possible with the type of programming you're looking for support for.
Awesome. Wow. Well, this is great. I'm really happy that you were able to spend some time with us and share your expertise. These are a lot of the questions and a lot of the challenges the nonprofits we've interviewed are having. So I'm sure this is valuable for them. So listeners, if you're interested, please reach out to Lori at Growth Owl, and we'll make sure to add her information in the description and the comments, all the social media things being tagged, including LinkedIn. But Lori, is there anything that maybe we didn't cover or anything you want to leave us with before we wrap up?
Yeah, you just got to try and take baby steps. I think the worst thing that you can do is create this huge strategy. Oh, I'm going to put together a list of 50 companies and I'm going to hit like 10 a week. No. Baby steps. Pick 1 or 2 companies over a 2-week period to just get to know, put it in your calendar, and then create a strategy of how you want to contact them. baby steps that really helps with impact and change. That would be my biggest advice.
All right. Well, it's so wonderful. Thank you, Lori, for your time. Really appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
And I'm
Thanks.
sure we'll be in touch soon.
That sounds good.
Thanks for tuning into this episode. If you know of a great organization or individual leaving a positive impact, we'd love to tell their story. Check us out and contact us at gtzp.org. Don't forget, for more stories like this, you could also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Instagram followers, our link trees in the bio. And for podcast listeners, we're on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Thanks for listening, and see you again soon.